Welcome to the Pirate Broadcast, where we interview interesting people doing interesting things, where you can expand your connections, your community. Kindness is cool and smiles are free. And let's get this party started. I'm excited about this conversation today because, welcome to the Pirate Broadcast. We're going to be talking about something unusual and very unique in life, and it's about monsters, and it's about the history, some of the things that go along with that. And today we have Michael. We're going to be chatting about his studies, his work, and how he's documenting monsters. So welcome, Michael. How are you doing?
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here among the pirates.
I don't know if pirates fall under your jurisdiction. However, I'm sure there's some effort to, when Halloween rolls around, there's always some pirates that are going to be showing up. So.
Oh, absolutely. I would say they're adjacent. Pirates are monster adjacent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well,
we're the best kind of pirates because we believe that kindness is cool and smiles are free. So we're out there spreading the enjoyment and hopefully a little bit more kindness. So Michael, we were talking before the show, and this subject just fascinates me at so many levels, because for the longest time in our history and storytelling and everything else, one of the things that draws a lot of people into storytelling is the effect of the monsters and what it brings to the table in terms of excitement and intrigue in the storytelling episodes. So give us a little snapshot about how this study that you're working on came to an effect and kind of how it developed. And then how did you get hooked into this?
Well, that's a great question, Russ. Thank you for asking that. So I think that for me personally, the beginning of my interest in monsters had to do with the fact that I grew up in the 1970s in Salt Lake City, Utah.
I grew up in Layton.
Oh, you did? No kidding. No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow. Well,
small world.
That is a small world. Holy cow. Oh, nice to see you, countryman.
Yes.
But I was Jewish, and it was a Mormon-dominated environment, and I was bullied a lot.
Yeah.
And the terms by which I was bullied had to do with monsters. They were asking me like, "Where are your horns? Where's your tail? Do you have black blood? That kind of thing." And so I think that was, without harping too much on my sad childhood. I think that was the beginning of my interest in monsters, and I never stopped being interested in monsters from the time I was a little kid. I was terrified of monsters, and then I became fascinated by them, and then I made them into my career. And I think that one of the things that I'm most interested in is the way that we project our anxieties onto people through monsters, right? So monsters, as we were talking about before the show, monsters by definition are not real. They are cultural bodies only, but we project them often onto living bodies in order to make ourselves feel more reassured about our anxieties, right? Because once we have them in a physical realm, we can defeat them, we can confront them and defeat them, right? But you'll notice that, so for instance, Frankenstein, as an example, is, a lot of people have argued over the years that Frankenstein is a manifestation of fear of new technologies and what will happen if unethical people get their hands on dangerous science.
Yeah.
And so that was a concern of people in the 19th century, and it's still a concern for us, which is why Frankenstein is still very much in our culture, right? If the fear that the monster embodies is no longer a fear in the culture, then the monster loses currency and kind of disappears. But you look at the monsters that have real staying power in our culture: Frankenstein, vampires, werewolves, ghosts. These are all monsters that embody some kind of present salient fear that our culture has, our society has.
An emotional trigger of sorts, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we want to see that played out. We're attracted to that, not only because it scares us, but because it's possibly therapeutic for us as well.
And I want to come back to that, but one of our friends, our mutual friends, Howard Kaufman, what are some of the characteristics that make a good monster? And I don't know. I mean, a good monster in terms of, monster identity, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a really good question, Howard.
That's a great question.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
Howard.
It depends on what you mean by good, obviously, right? But if we're talking about longevity, then the monster has to be adaptable enough to continue to respond to cultural fears or social fears and anxieties, and as well as personal ones.
Mm-hmm.
So the vampire is a perfect example, because the vampire embodies or straddles the boundaries between life and death. The
struggle to resist.
Exactly, to resist your darker nature. I think that a lot of our attraction to monsters is not that we fear that the monsters will come and eat us, but that we fear that we may actually be those monsters, that we may be the predator, we may be the unrepentant ghoul that is behaving badly, in order to survive. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. So some monsters tap into some deep-seated social anxieties or personal anxieties. Others adapt. So you take the zombie, for instance. One of my favorite monsters is the zombie. In the 1930s, when the zombie first appeared in American culture, it embodied a fear of a racial other, right? Of people of African descent from South America coming into America and with their diabolical witchcraft and taking us over, right? That was the initial fear. And then that turned into communists in the 50s. And then somehow that turned into AIDS in the 80s and 90s. And now it has to do with a fear of globalism. So we've got these zombies that come from all over the world and attack us, but it's always about the outsider bringing disease and contagion in, right?
Have you found any monsters that are no longer in existence that were in centuries past?
Oh, sure, absolutely. Yeah, there's thousands of monsters that have fallen off the wayside. The Fyrdarg, for instance, which was a sort of a evil faun kind of creature that terrorized the British Isles for many centuries and then disappeared. The Amphisbaena, the two-headed snake, that used to be in the jungles of Africa. The Romans were terrified of that, but that disappeared. So there's a graveyard of monsters. That if I showed you them now, you'd be like, that's not scary.
Yeah. I'm fast. Would here's a tightrope. Is Bigfoot fall into the monster category or the kind of the UFO eccentric kind of
I think, yeah, Bigfoot is a very interesting case, right? Because I try in my work to distinguish between monsters, which are cultural manifestations of these creatures, and cryptids, which are supposedly real creatures that are out there, that people have made legends about. So I would say, to the extent that Bigfoot is real, he's a cryptid, and to the extent that he exists only in stories and myths and folk tales and rumor, then it's very productive to see him as a monster, and we can analyze him as a monster. Yeah. So if he shows up in a movie or a play or a video game or something like that, then he's a monster, right? But if he shows up in the wild, behind a boulder in a slightly out of focus area, then he's a cryptid.
That's fantastic.
That makes sense.
Wendy joins us. Joining the pirate ship is a fantastic adventure. Welcome, Michael Ahoy.
Avast there, Wendy. Thanks for.
And then Elise in from South Africa. Good morning, Russ and Michael and Pirates. Fantastic. Hello. Angie gets to join us today. Good morning, everyone. I really appreciate it. I'm loving this. Wendy says, I'm loving this conversation because monsters morph based on the fears we need to fight.
Absolutely, Wendy.
Absolutely. That's so true. Nancy says, good morning to all. And
Morning,
I find it fascinating because, some of our darkest, deepest fears are manifested by the stories that are told as kids and everything else. And, monsters kind of bring that element of excitement and intrigue and fear and anxiety and all of the emotions come to light when we think about monsters, especially when it comes to stories, the Grimm's tales and all of the the theater that's going on. There are monsters in a lot of theater, so I can see where it can be used as a enhancement to a story or the center of a story. And so how do you maneuver the studies, and how do you categorize these monsters as you're studying the history and everything about them?
Well, that's a great question, Russ. Because of what I'm interested in, I categorize them according to the fears that they embody, right? Okay. So let's see how to phrase this in a way that will sound interesting. When I'm looking at the Frankenstein monster or the Frankenstein story, right? I'm looking all the way back to ancient Greece because Mary Shelley subtitled her novel, it's called Frankenstein, the Modern Prometheus. And that's something that the scholars don't really investigate very much. They just assume that, the Romantics were interested in Prometheus as the rebel god, the god who rebelled against Zeus and stole fire for humanity, thus saving humanity and condemning himself to thousands of years of torture, right? But she has to be referring to the play Prometheus Bound by Aeschylus. So when I teach my classes, I start with Prometheus Bound as the first play that we read, and then we get into Frankenstein. And so we can say, okay, what does she really mean by him being the modern Prometheus? What exactly would a modern Prometheus do as opposed to an ancient one, right? And again, he transgresses against God, I guess you might say, by creating life himself, that giving that spark, stealing that spark from the divine and making it his own. And but that's not why he suffers. That's not why Frankenstein suffers. Frankenstein suffers because he's a bad parent, because he abandons his creation after he finishes the job. He abandons the monster. And so the monster then learns that it's unwanted, that it's a monster, that no one loves it, and it becomes a murderous creature as a direct result of that, right? So then
there's a lesson there.
Yeah,
bad parents create bad kids.
Bad parents create monsters. Yeah, no question. So then most scholars read the book and then they look at the movie, the 1931 James Whale film, and say, wow, why is it so different, right? But what I know is that there's 100 years of theatrical production in between those two time periods, right? In between the publication of Frankenstein in 1819 and the movie, which was based on a play by Peggy Webling in the 30s, right? So if you look at the theatrical record, you can see how the story changes with every theatrical adaptation over 100 years to become the Frankenstein that we know today, right? And why that's so different from the novel. Anyway.
And there's been a lot of versions of Frankenstein just in the last century.
Countless.
So,
yeah. And then if you add to that, Jurassic Park is very much a Frankenstein story. It's got a castle. It's got a storm, right?
Yeah.
It's got a laboratory. Blade Runner is very much a Frankenstein story, you know. The Matrix, I think, is very much a Frankenstein story, So, these stories pervade our culture and they affect us in so many ways. And sometimes we don't even know it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how do you catalog these stories as you're studying? Because of the enormous and range and diversity in monsters, especially in theater, there's nuances, and just like you've mentioned, there's a thread that goes through these things. So how do you catalog them for people to kind of break it down and understand it?
Well, so that's a great question. So I have a book. I guess I should probably pitch it.
Yeah, you should probably pitch your book.
Pitch my book. This is it. It's called The Monster.
Michael,
Theater
can we
History.
pitch your book?
Yeah, sure. Here it is. The Monster in Theater History, This Thing of Darkness, published by Routledge.
That's awesome.
And I'll give you a link to the page where you can buy it if you like. But in this book, what I do is I take different monsters. I take the Frankenstein monster, vampires, werewolves, the golem, and ghosts, and I do what I just did with you just now. I create genealogical studies of them so that you can see how they manifest in different cultures over different time periods, or in the same culture over different time periods, and then how that can indicate how that culture's fear, how the social psychology of that culture is changing over time, right? And what they're afraid of is different, right, over time. So what I'm particularly interested in looking at how a zombie in 2020 is different from a zombie in 1930, right? What are the characteristics of them that are different? How did it change? And then why did it change, right? Vampires particularly interesting in that regard.
Because Walking Dead.
Yeah, exactly. What about Walking Dead, right? What does that have to do with it, right?
Yeah, there's a connection there. Man, we got some comments here. Let's answer some questions here.
Yeah.
Wendy says, I'm loving this conversation because monsters morph based on our fears, need to fight. And then Nancy goes, morning all. Good morning, Nancy. How are you doing? Nancy says, I think some of our deepest, darkest fears are from the unknown. Monsters are a way to concretize our fears, gives us something to fight against.
Absolutely.
Actually solidify it. That's a great concept. I like that. Maybe and then I'd love to learn about pirates feared as young children. Me, vampires. Taking something from me that I urgently need, blood. Now we're producing a series of novels about TV, about blood with a twist. My Golden Blood. Yes. I love that project. Hey, Pirate Nation, Martin says.
Hey, Martin.
And then Martin says, hi, Nancy. The Frankenstein story mirrors what we all feel. And it is universal. It is universal. It is that essence of, wow, what do I fear? What's my deepest, darkest fear? And abandonment is a huge part of that. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Are monsters accelerating in the 20th century and 21st century?
Yes, I think so. I think they've always been a vibrant part of our culture, but I think possibly as what we used to call when you and I were kids, Russ, there was a thing we called geek culture.
Yeah.
Now we call that culture, right? Monsters, fantasy, Lord of the Rings, superheroes, right? This used to be the province of geeks. Now it's everybody, right?
Now it's everybody.
And I think that has a lot to do with this object right here.
Yeah.
The pocket computer. Which enables us to have access to, technology is designed by geeks for geeks. And so the rest of us just run along. And I say the rest of us, I'm a geek.
I'm a geek.
Yeah, we're geeks. So I think that as geek culture has sort of become culture, the interest in monsters and other fantasy creatures has just become more and more prevalent. And I like it. But I also think that as we continue to, if you look at our nation right now, Russ, it's very hard to say that it's not very polarized, and people are terrified of what the future will bring. The climate is changing, and we seem to be very divided in our culture. There's a lot of things to be afraid of, And the more fearful we are, the more monsters are going to manifest in our society.
What's the most fascinating monster you've studied so far?
Wow. The most fascinating monster. I guess for me personally, just personally, it's the werewolf. The werewolf is the most interesting monster to me personally, but that's because my psychology, my fears from when I was a child are specifically revolve around wolves and getting eaten by wolves and becoming a wolf and things like that. So, so for me, I used to be terrified of werewolves. And even when I was in college, I couldn't go see a werewolf movie because I was too scared of them. Right now, because I know a lot more about them and because I know a lot more about myself, sorry about that. I'm absolutely enthralled with them, and I can't wait to see the next werewolf movie. And I just love werewolves now. So that's something too. You can change your fear into joy if you study this stuff, and you learn a lot about yourself if you investigate the monster that scares you the most. Like Wendy said, she was really scared of vampires. Like I would probe that, Wendy. I would see if you can get in there and see if you can figure out why it is exactly that vampires scare you so much. Is because you fear the loss of that thing that makes you alive, right? Yeah. What is threatening that, right? So it could be a lot of fun. You can learn a lot about yourself.
I love it. There's a lot of people that fear different things, and one that you had mentioned was clowns.
Oh yeah.
Clowns don't fall under exactly the monster category because they are real.
Yeah.
But you also had a fascination with joining the circus. So
oh yeah, absolutely.
It's not too late, Michael. You can still join the circus.
I kind of did. I got involved with a group in Seattle called Circus Contraption, which was this amazing sort of dark burlesque circus troupe that was very popular for a while. And unfortunately, they don't exist anymore as an organization. But I luckily developed some very close friendships with some of the members of them, and so we collaborate on different projects together.
Well, I was thinking of something along the lines of Monsters and Cirque Soleil. So it's like it'd be kind of a interesting combination, but
absolutely. But a clown, clowns are scary because they straddle a nightmarish realm of pain and when I had a clown explain to me once that when a juggler juggles, the whole point is to make it look easy, right? And when a clown juggles, the whole point is to make it look hard. Like it's about to collapse into this horrible destruction at any moment, right? The clown is, trying to, and so clowns are scary, and clowns know that they need to be very, very careful when they work, because they know that they straddle that boundary, that they could become monsters at any second, right? Yeah, definitely.
So monsters, what's on the future and the horizon for monsters and the study of monsters? I mean, you've been studying this for a number of years now. You're documenting this in theater and some of the things that are coming out. Any epiphanies that took place? Any kind of large gotchas like, wow, I had never even imagined that.
Yeah, a couple of things. One is, I don't know if your listeners know about the Slenderman. The Slenderman is a really terrifying monster that only exists on the internet. And I don't know have you heard about the Slenderman?
I haven't.
Oh, he's a very scary, faceless, tall creature in a suit. He wears a suit and he appears in photos, usually of children, and he's watching the children from behind from the distance, and as far as I can tell, this is a brand new monster. This is a monster that doesn't have any antecedents in older monsters, which is very rare, right? Yeah. So I think that this is the monster that when we use the internet, we ignore the fact that we're being watched, that our data is being gathered, that there are people who are paying very close attention to what we do online who do not have our best interests at heart, right? Right. And in order for us to use the internet, we have to ignore that fear, right? But it comes out, it bubbles out. And so it becomes the Slenderman, right? Or the virus creature in the Matrix, right? The terrifying virus creature. So so I'm very interested to see what Slenderman does in the next few years as a new monster.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, these things are fascinating subjects, and it's all about our psyche and how we perceive life and where we're going to take our next steps.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to create any more danger in our life than there already exists. So a monster is just a way of describing and bringing into reality of sorts some of our darkest, deepest fears.
Exactly. There's a case that I think is really interesting, which is that Europeans used to be very terrified of fairies. Faeries. The Fae creatures were these alien creatures that lived just on the other side of the mirror, or just in the shadows, right? And they had their own nations and their own politics, and they had their own values, and they were very, very difficult for us to understand, why they did anything in particular. Or they would steal children, they would curdle milk, they would, do terrible things to you.
Everything that happened bad was because of the fairies.
Exactly. And I had a student who did a study of aliens as monsters. And she came to the conclusion that we're no longer scared of fairies, but we are scared of aliens. And they sort of fill the same ecological niche, if you will. They are these terrifying creatures that live just beyond our sight, that we don't know why they do what they do. They steal children. They cause bad things to happen, and we don't know why, because we don't know what their values are, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting. I think
that's fascinating.
Cool. Yeah.
Nancy says, Slenderman, my elementary students talk about him all the time. He creates fear and fascination.
Yeah. Yeah. The kids are terrified of Slenderman.
Yeah. And that is a scary monster.
Yeah.
Martin,
yeah.
hadn't heard about him until now, but I think that he just became my number one monster.
Sorry about that, Martin. The Slenderman is very scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He says, I loved clowns as a kid, and I feel they are being vilified unfairly. Might be because I might become a clown activist.
Martin, I think it's great that you love clowns. Clowns, of course, are not really monsters unless they appear as monsters, in It, But I do think, and so I'm sorry if you feel that the monsters are being vilified. That was not my intent. If the clowns are being vilified, it wasn't my intention to cast aspersions upon a whole people who are good entertainers. Yeah.
Dr. Jekyll and Hyde. Yes,
yeah.
For me.
Yeah.
Wendy says, wolves are bullies, Michael. You have found joy.
I have. Thanks,
actually.
Wendy. Thanks, Wendy.
Humans took monster form in our childhood. Now we have to see a few humans are actually monsters. Never again.
Yeah,
down with clowns.
Oh no, they're in a tweet war.
Yeah, it's like the pineapple on pizza.
Right.
Clowns or no clowns.
Talk about monstrosity.
Yeah. So, Michael, how do people connect with you and catch up with you? Where do they find you?
Anybody can write me at Chemers, which is CHEMERS at UCSC.edu. That's my work address. You can check out our website. There's not a lot on there right now, but that's going to change rapidly in the next few months.
Nice.
That's monsterstudies.ucsc.edu.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for showing up and sharing this. I know we attempted a couple of connections earlier on and finally got to happen. So it's absolutely wonderful experience. So,
well, I'm very thankful to be here, and it was a great conversation. I really appreciate it, Russ. I'm happy to come on any other time.
Yeah, I know it goes by quick, so definitely have to come back and share with the pirates some of the activities that you got going on. And as this expands and we evolve as our own little monsters, we can actually see what's going on around us. So.
Absolutely. Well, I'll be happy to give reports from the field I'm out there with the monsters, so I'm happy to give reports.
Love it. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And everyone, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Howard Kaufman says, fascinating. Wendy says, this is great info. Martin says, as just proven, LOL. No. Martin says, no, you, the clowns. They seem to be everyone's favorite character.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Martin.
Anyway, thank you so much for being here, everyone. As always, kindness is cool. Smiles are free. Like, comment, and share. Click on that subscribe button as much as possible so we can be found by others. And as always, kindness is cool. Smiles are free, and you enjoy the day. Take care.
Thanks, Russ. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining the Pirate Broadcast. If you found this content valuable, please like, comment, and share it across your social media channels. I would love the opportunity to help others grow in their business. The Pirate Syndicate is a platform where you show up, we produce the show. It's that easy. If you want to be seen, be heard, and be talked about, join the Pirate Syndicate today.